There's no excuse for an able-bodied adult to be out of work. A lot of financial commentators, particularly YouTube sensation Caleb Hammer, take this view, often to an aggressive extent. There are several problems with this position, however. In the UK, there are currently over 870,000 more unemployed people than there are available jobs for them to go to. Even if we were to believe the UK DWP linked employability support sector, which insists that half of all jobs are never even advertised because hidden job market, that means there's still almost 130,000 unemployed people who will not be able to just get a job because the jobs literally do not exist. There aren't enough jobs for the number of people we have. The Department for Work and Pensions' refusal to provide meaningful self-employment support, the inability of many over 65s to feel confident retiring, the amount of people having to work 2 or more jobs, the number of 13 to 16-year-olds who are legally allowed to work part-time but are not considered part of the working age population and are therefore not included in statistics, who are obliged by their parents to get jobs, and the rise of AI are all factors that are only going to continue to reduce the number of vacancies available. While the systemic failures of the UK state education, the antipathy in the native population towards any kind of focused study in economically necessary sectors such as STEM and medicine, and therefore the continued need for constant high-level immigration to meet the skills of those sectors, and the refusal of UK adults to stop having unprotected hetero intercourse, which results obviously in more humans who will grow over time to be more adult humans in the working age population, means we will keep adding to the number of people in the country, and thus keep ensuring the discrepancy between the people who need employment, and particularly employment which is paid well enough to keep them away from needing support from the state welfare, both through the course of their working life and into their retirement, and the number of jobs available. That imbalance will remain because there are no actions being taken to even communicate to the population that we need to address an imbalance, or even that an imbalance is there. The second reason that the statement that there is no reason that an able-bodied adult should be out of work is problematic is that it simply accepts that disabled people will inevitably be unable to secure and maintain employment and will therefore remain in poverty. In the UK, that is a problem that is exacerbated by the fact that we have a very hostile and combative welfare system that does not provide any kind of tailored, personalised support, including refusing that support to disabled people. Adding to the issues that the apparatus of the welfare state, as presented through the Department for Work and Pensions, Job Centre Plus, and the wider employability sector causes, employer attitudes in the UK are not great towards impactful disability. They're not great towards mental health. There's a surface level, oh yes, mental health, very, very aware, but, very accommodating, very accepting. Of course, everybody has mental health, but if you have the kind of mental health that doesn't magically improve with the provision of a virtual coffee morning, you are likely to run into problems with your employer at some point in the UK, unfortunately. There are also wider social barriers to general access for many disabled people. And all of that just reinforces the position that, oh well, of course disabled people won't be able to be employed, while simultaneously blaming and punishing, particularly through financial exclusion, disabled people for being disabled. There is, however, a very real need to recognise that not every health impact is a disability, and not every disability is disabling. And that can be quite a complex thing for people to process. It can be quite difficult, genuinely, for people to identify. It can result in people feeling stressed out and frustrated about how they are supposed to manage experiences that they are genuinely having. So the UK government has a fixed definition of a disability, but the wording allows for a lot of finessing of things that aren't actually disabling in terms of someone's ability to engage with employment, whilst also excluding people who are experiencing disabling health impacts that don't meet the requirement that they be ongoing for more than 12 months and not likely to improve. For example, someone who is injured in a car accident, that person is going to be disabled potentially by the impact of that car accident, but that's not considered a disability because it's not likely to have a lasting impact. It's something that will improve, it can be treated, etc. So there's a lot of issues with the way the UK even defines disability, much less how it addresses it for employment purposes. So what's my own position on this? Full disclosure, I do not work for the Department for Work and Pensions. I have nothing to do with the UK government. I'm just a British citizen who happens to be disabled, and alongside an actual disability as I perceive it, to have several other health impacts. It's great fun being me. But in my position, a disability is something that is not going to improve, or which cannot improve by any great degree, as determined by more than one medical professional with specific experience in the area of that disability. And that's really important for UK employment, because the DWP, which is the Department for Work and Pensions, loves to send people for employability assessments with occupational therapists and physiotherapists or general ward nurses when those people have multiple disabilities, they have complex and severe mental health issues, and they're trying to explain this to someone who only actually has slightly more than a layperson's understanding of those disabilities. And obviously that becomes more challenging for the individual with the disability when their disability is a relatively unknown one, or one that is well known but frequently misrepresented and misunderstood. Continuing on with my perspective on things, a disability is only disabling if it prevents the person living with it from doing things that they genuinely want to do and they actively enjoy. So, to have a personal account, in my case, I have several health impacts. So I'm legally blind. I actually have 4 separate diagnosed sight loss conditions. I have been diagnosed as schizophrenic since 2007. I'm diagnosed with generalized anxiety and social anxiety. Both of those were diagnosed in 2012. I was diagnosed in 2006 with severe clinical depression. I have IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. I also have auditory processing disorder, or APD, and also some mild physical hearing loss. So APD is the way your ear works is fine. There's nothing that would mean you're actually hearing impaired or deaf, but something in your brain just doesn't do what it's meant to do with the sound input. The sound input can be received just fine. It can't be interpreted very well. Whereas hearing loss is the sound input isn't fully received, or in the case of someone who is deaf, isn't received at all. I also have a very, very mild mobility impairment because of some damage to tendons in my ankle, which was caused back in my younger days when I used to do kickboxing. Of these, the only things I consider disabling disabilities are the sight loss and the schizophrenia, because both of those have significant and distressing impact on things I enjoy doing, things I want to do, and in me pursuing genuine career ambitions that I would be really excited about, as well as social and personal goals. The main impact, obviously, of being registered blind is that I can't drive, and honestly, that was my whole life was centered around the fact that I would be able to drive. From the age of 15, I had a whole life planned out around the fact that I would be able to drive. It also makes it difficult for me to access and feel confident in social situations, and it means I'll never be able to be as good at creative endeavors as I once was. I used to be fairly good at artistic stuff, particularly, and near as I want to be. I've even, a lot of the reason that these videos are not particularly polished is I genuinely cannot see to edit videos, and I have no money to pay a video editor. So you just get it as it is. It's also sometimes why, unfortunately, I'm not able to add subtitles, because I just can't actually see what I'm doing well enough to do that. Particularly for the longer videos, I can't. YouTube doesn't enable me to post a full transcription and description, which is usually my work away. My work around that is I will usually work from a script for a longer video and just copy and paste that script. But unfortunately, YouTube has a character limit, so I can't do that. So apologies if I am not able to get YouTube's auto captions on this video. And also apologies if I do get the auto captions on and they don't make a lot of sense. I'm always happy if someone wants to drop me an email, and the email will be in the description, in the video description. Drop me an email and I can email you across the transcript. That's not a problem at all. In the case of the schizophrenia, I can lose hours or sometimes days, even when I'm just at home with no demands or expectations. I can be looking forward to going out somewhere and I'm suddenly in a paranoid state. I'm having hallucinations. Fun fact on that, I have actually I actually am having less frequent visual hallucinations as my sight loss progresses, but more scent-based hallucinations, which is something I'd really love to research as to whether that's a consistent experience with people who have visual impairment and schizophrenia, or whether that's just me. So that's quite a big impact, and obviously it's going to be both of those. The sight loss and the schizophrenia are going to be significant impacts in a workplace, as well as having significant impacts just on my life in general. The anxiety and depression have a lot of impacts, but they don't typically stop me from doing things I want to do in the ways that schizophrenia and the sight loss do. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I am not able to work around my mental health with the anxiety and depression, and I just have to let it happen. I equate that to, you might wake up one day and you're planning on going to the beach or the park, and it's just chucking it down with rain and there's a howling gale, and you can't do anything about that. You just have to go, okay, that's not happening today. We'll wait for the weather to pass. And again, I can manage disability and anxiety, depression and anxiety. I can typically manage in a workplace if I'm not dealing with people who expect happy, happy, joy, joy, fixed smiles, bright, bright, cheery all the time. And if I'm given the space to just step out sometimes, because people are people, and people can sometimes be a lot, and depression and anxiety both massively reduce your tolerance for other people's nonsense, shall we say. Moving on, the IBS is disabling, but generally manageable. So it will stop me doing some things when it's particularly an issue, but I do know how to handle it if I'm able to just stay at home, and I can generally medicate it. I also know what 95% of the triggers for it are: carbs, oranges, cold, and stress. Obviously, oranges are very, very easy to avoid. Cold is quite easily mitigated. I'm low carb nutrition is fine. Stress is a bit more problematic to avoid. You can't really avoid stress and still be alive. I can generally work around the hearing loss. I do sometimes run into problems where entirely abled people in jobs literally pathologically refuse to use email at all, and everything has to be done by phone because it's so much easier for them to communicate on a phone call. And it's like, that's great, I probably won't hear the phone ringing. So have fun with that. And meetings, the meetings that absolutely could be emails, great, you like to thrash things out verbally. I'm drifting off because I either can't actually literally hear what you're saying, or I'm not able to process it. The APD makes me very, very sensitive and stressed by background noise, and loud environments, but wireless headphones exist, and the ones I have and use were £7 on eBay. So, they're affordable, they're there, don't have to bother access to work for those. Not that that would be be any point to doing that, because when I have tried to bother them about the sight loss, they've taken 9 months to even respond to an initial inquiry, much less actually do anything. And then when they did do something, they got it wrong anyway. So, but that's a topic for another video. In terms of my mobility impact from the damage to my ankle, that's really negligible. It's there. I need to wear an ankle support if I'm going to be doing a lot of moving around. I'm going to be on my feet all day, or I'm dealing with uneven terrain. I will have very low level background pain all the time. Sometimes that becomes more intense, but ibuprofen exists, and very occasionally my ankle just decides that it's not going to perform its job of supporting the wider structure of my leg, and then I just have to kind of hobble off and lay down. But that doesn't happen very often at all, and I do have a walking stick if I need to go somewhere and my ankle is not really in the mood to cooperate. So when I'm dealing with applying for jobs and engaging with employers, I only actually talk about the sight loss, because that's what I need accommodations for. And everything else, including the schizophrenia, I'm able to manage myself if I'm working fully remote with minimal meeting requirements. Problem is, those opportunities are increasingly becoming non-existent. And as I've mentioned before, the Department for Work and Pensions does not believe in tailored employment support, and therefore you can't actually go in and go, hey, I have all of these health issues, but actually I can manage 90% of them if it's okay for me to just apply for these types of jobs. No, that's not okay, because there aren't enough of those types of jobs, which you'd think would be the Department for Work and Pensions problem and responsibility for resolving, but they delegate it to individual claimants, including disabled people. So that's fun. And then we come to the main issue with all of the insistence that no able-bodied adult should be unemployed, and you can just go and sling fries at McDonald's, or you can go and stack shelves at Tesco. Other supermarkets and fast food outlets are available. And the issue is that there just aren't enough of those jobs, because the government isn't doing its job. The job of a government is to ensure that its state-funded education creates a population who are capable and competent to access the economically necessary sectors. Whether you are interested in STEM or medicine is actually irrelevant. I've done plenty of jobs I'm not interested in. I've worked in call centres. That was a disaster. I didn't know about the hearing loss or the APD at that point, which both of those explain why it was a disaster, and I know better than to take those jobs now. I've worked in retail. I've worked bar. I've worked any number of jobs that I'm not really interested in, but I'm very interested in the money they provide. Very interested in having bills paid, having a roof over my head, having food in the fridge, and being able to do some cool stuff that I actually do enjoy. So that's the job of the government, is to actually create an education system that gets it through its civilian population's head that you're not necessarily going to enjoy a particular job, you're not necessarily going to be interested in it, you're not necessarily interested in the learning that leads up to it. You may find that learning challenging, but hey, those jobs are the jobs that get money coming into the sovereign economy through exporting knowledge, skills, or actual products. So get over it and get on with it. Furthermore, it is the job of government, in partnership with employers, to ensure a continuous flow and some level of surplus of sustainable revenue generating jobs, which are widely accessible, truly inclusive, and which actually work with both employers and employees or applicants, rather than creating an adversarial system. Importantly, those jobs should also pay enough that even if someone has 15 disabilities, a partner with 10 high impact health challenges, 15 kids, that person, if they are employed, does not need to turn to the state either to support their working age life or their retirement. And that's the welfare reform we need, is a welfare reform that sees a commitment from the government and employers and the education sector, actually, to creating a system within which everyone can be included. And you have to have that accessibility and inclusion built in before you turn to people who are just trying to survive and go, right, here's your list of commitments and expectations and the things that we're going to send you into crippling poverty if you don't comply with. And actually putting people in poverty as a punishment for not meeting your expectations as the government, or your expectations as an arm of the government, or your expectation as an employer, is actually deeply harmful. Because if someone is in poverty, they can't engage in discretionary spending, which in the UK at the moment is a significant contributor to gross domestic product or GDP. So basically the country's income, the government's income. They may end up unhoused, which places the burden of cost on the NHS and social care for dealing with the impact of homelessness. Their children may go into care, which places a burden of cost on social care. And that's the problem. By taking the position that it is effortless for an able-bodied adult to be employed, and as the UK government does, that disabled people are basically able people because we've done so much work on inclusion now, even though no actual real work has been done. Basically, the work on inclusion is the cognitive equivalent of putting up a sign saying "Caution, men at work," and there's nobody doing anything in the road. The road is just closed because of this sign, and there's no indication that anybody ever intends to come out and actually do any work. But again, been here long enough. That's a topic for another video. And so, yeah, there's a lot of reform that's needed for the welfare system. But the reform that's needed falls on employers and the government before you can apply it to individuals, particularly individuals with disabilities. Thank you for listening. I'm Ash, the Productive Pessimist, and I hope to see you again in a future video.